This is going to be part 1 of a series that I'm going to be working on, which is going to be an overall tutorial of all things related to affixing abilities onto weapons and units. This first part is going to be an introduction to affixing, explaining what it is, what the process is for affixing abilities onto weapons and units, and what the general rules are when you are doing so. So first off, what is affixing? Well, first let's take a look at my inventory, and you'll see that I have 3 weapons here. And if we actually look on the item details panel, in augments/potentials, it has something called Might 1. This is an ability that gives us plus 10 to our melee power stat. If we look at the other weapons I have a Gunblade, which gives us Deftness 1, which gives us plus 10 to Dexterity, and we have a Vita Rifle, which gives us Precision 1, which is plus 10 to range power. Now let's look at a different weapon this time. We're going to look at a weapon that I actually use, and you'll see that it has a lot more abilities on it, and the total amount of stat boosts on the right is far higher than what we were just looking at. You're also going to notice some really confusing things in here. First, we have something that is highlighted in yellow, called Liberated Fang Redux Level 3. Now this is actually not an augment or an ability, this is actually what's called a potential, which is why at the top it says augments/potentials. So if you ever see a yellow ability at the top of a weapon, just remember that's not actually an ability and it has nothing to do with affixing in general. Below that, we actually have 2 really weird abilities with the prefix S5 and S4. After that, you'll see that we have some really powerful abilities, such as Mana Reverie, which gives us plus 50 to a bunch of our stats, Astral Soul, which gives us plus 35 to a bunch of stats, Grand Might, which gives us plus 60 to melee power, Exegial Glare, which gives us a ton of defense as well as other stats, Might 6, which might actually look familiar to what we were just looking at. You'll see that this one gives us plus 45 to melee, whereas if we were to go back to our Vita Lance, this one is Might 1 and only gives us plus 10 to melee. So the reason why I'm actually pointing this out is that this weapon right here is actually something that I affixed, and that's actually the reason why its stats are so good. Normally when you're playing the game, the weapons and units that you find laying on the ground from killing enemies and finishing quests will not have abilities already on them that are this powerful, which brings us to what affixing is. Affixing is the process of putting strong abilities on your weapons and units in order to create something like what we see here. So how do you actually get started with affixing? Well, when you're in the shopping plaza, you want to go to this counter over here and talk to the item scientists. When you go here, you'll have a list of options: Enhance Item, Affix Augment, Transfer Augments, Transfer S-Grade Augment, and Add Unit Skill. 3 that we're most interested in are Affix Augment, Transfer Augments, and Transfer S-Grade Augment. For now, we're only going to look at Affix Augment, but we will go into the other ones eventually in later episodes. So if you click on Affix Augment, you're going to get a list of weapons and units in your inventory. This first menu is asking you to pick the base weapon or unit that you want to put abilities on. So as an example, we're going to choose this Vita Lance, which has Might 1 on it. When you click Affix Augment, it's going to pop up a menu full of weapons and units that are currently in your inventory. What this first menu is asking you to do is to pick the base weapon that you want to put the new abilities onto. As an example, let's go down and pick the Vita Rifle, which currently has Precision 1 on it. The next menu is going to ask you to pick other weapons to use as fodder. Weapons that you use as fodder in the affixing process are destroyed in the process, and you won't be able to get them back. In exchange for destroying the fodder weapons, the abilities that are on those weapons can be used in the affixing process in order to put more abilities on your base weapon. So as an example, let's say that we wanted to get Casting 1 onto our Vita Rifle instead of Precision 1. We're going to click on Vita Rod, click Confirm, and you'll see that we have the option of Precision 1 with 100% and Casting 1 also with 100%. This percentage is actually the percent chance that the affix will be successful. For some affixes, this percentage might be lower than 100% and you'll have a chance to fail. We'll talk about failing affixes later. Now moving on though, if we look to the right, you'll see the list of available augments to fix. We have slot 1 and extra slots, and extra slots is in red. The reason why we have 1 slot and 1 extra slot is because this base weapon that we have only has the ability Precision 1 on it. Since this weapon only has 1 ability on it, this means it only has 1 slot available on it at the moment. However, we do have that extra slot. So let's say we wanted to keep Precision 1. We still have that extra slot, so we could put Casting 1 on it as well. Now when we click on this, you're going to notice at the right that both of these turn red and the percent chance of success actually went down from 100% to 95%. This is because we are going to be affixing one more ability onto this weapon than it's currently able to handle. This is what's known as upslotting. We're not going to get into the details of upslotting in this video, but at the very least I want you to know what upslotting is for when we do get to it. Now let's see if we can actually successfully upslot this. When you click Start Affix, you're going to get the option of choosing items to use in the affix. Success boosters are items that you can use to boost the chance of success when affixing these abilities. I'll talk about this in a later episode as well. For now, let's just click Yes. As you can see, we successfully affixed these two abilities onto our weapon. If we actually look at the weapon, you'll see that it now has Precision 1 and Casting 1. Now let's click on this again and see if we can affix something else. Now when we're shown our inventory to select fodder, you may or may not have noticed, but we're actually missing some of the weapons that are in our inventory. If we go back, we'll actually see that we have a few more weapons, such as these bows, this Vita Talus, wand, and jet boots. Now the reason we aren't allowed to select these as fodder right now is actually because of the number of ability slots on our base weapon. So one of the rules when affixing is actually that when you select a base weapon to affix, the fodder that you use to affix abilities onto that weapon need to have the same number of abilities or more than the base weapon. That's why when we look at the weapons on the left here, you'll notice, for example, the Vita Lance, underneath its name, it has the attack stat, which is 273, but to the right of that, we have a weird square symbol and the number 2. This number 2 means we have 2 ability slots on this weapon. And if we actually look at the weapon on the right, you'll see it has Might 1 and Deafness 1, which are currently taking up those slots. You'll also notice that the weapons below that have 4 augment slots. Since the rule is that we're only allowed to select weapons with the same number of augments or more, we're still able to use these weapons as fodder. Now, one more rule I do want to mention about affixing is that when you're affixing a weapon, you can only use weapons as fodder, and when you're affixing units, you can only use units as fodder. Now back to actually affixing this, the base weapon that we are currently affixing is the one that previously only had 1 ability on it, but now has 2 on it. Let's say we wanted to affix the abilities from this Vita Lance onto it. Click Confirm, and if you look on the right, you'll see that we now have slot 1 and slot 2. Those are the slots we were talking about before where it showed the number 2 next to it. If you remember before, it only had 1 slot, and that's actually what upslotting does. Upslotting actually gives you another slot on that weapon. And as you can see, we could potentially try to upslot this to 3 slots as well. Now, like I said, I'm not going to talk about upslotting too much in this video. I just wanted to talk about the slots in general so that you know what slots are. And really, slots are just equivalent to the number of abilities currently on the weapon. Now, we're not actually going to fix this weapon. We're going to go back and we're going to select a different base weapon. This time, we're going to select this photon bow that has 1 augment. So when I click on this bow, I'm going to be presented with a list of weapons to use as fodder. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned yet is you're actually able to use more than 1 weapon as fodder. In fact, you're able to use up to 5 different weapons as fodder. So, if we wanted, we could click on this Vita Lance, this Gunblade, this Vita Rifle, this Alba Bow, and this Vita Talus. When I click on this wand, you'll actually notice that when we scroll up, the Vita Lance was deselected, and same goes if I keep doing that. That's because we are only allowed to select 5 weapons as fodder. Now, one more thing I want to point out about selecting more than 1 piece of fodder is that if we actually look at the top right, you'll see the amount of meseta that I currently have on me. To the left of that, you'll see something that says amount, and it says 0. That is actually the amount of meseta that it's going to cost you during the affixing process. Now, I'm actually doing this during a special week where this costs 0 for me. However, during a normal week, this would not say 0, and in fact, the amount of meseta it would cost you would scale up depending on how many weapons you're using as fodder. So if you were to use 2 weapons as fodder, that would be cheaper than if you were to use 5 weapons as fodder. Now, this is pretty much the end of the basics that I want to teach you in this video. So the main things that I want you to remember are 1. The affixing process requires you to select 1 weapon or 1 unit to use as the base weapon or unit that you are going to put the abilities onto, and then allows you to select between 1 and 5 weapons or units to use as fodder that will be destroyed, but allow you to use the abilities on them when affixing abilities to the base weapon. The second thing that I want you to remember is that you can only use weapons or units with the same number of augment slots or more than the base weapon or unit that you're affixing the abilities onto. And 3 is that when you affix one more ability than your weapon currently has, that will decrease the chances of success, and the term for this is known as upslotting. This is it for the introduction to affixing. In the next episode, I'm going to go over some external tools that you can use that are useful for both affixing and learning how to affix in general. If you found this video to be helpful in any way, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.